They found the exam papers in his locker. The sentence echoed through the auditorium louder than the principal's microphone. Hundreds of students stared as two teachers emptied my locker onto the stage. Answer sheets, photocopies, a sealed envelope with a National University mock examination logo. Every piece of evidence pointed at me. The whispers spread like wildfire. Cheater. I knew he wasn't that smart, so that's how he always ranked first. I searched the crowd until I found the only face that mattered. Lena Hart, the campus beauty, student council president, the girl I had protected for 3 years. She stood beside the vice principal with watery eyes, her fingers trembling around the microphone. She looked devastated. I didn't want to believe it, she whispered. Her voice cracked perfectly. But I saw Ethan entering the records room yesterday. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. I laughed, not because it was funny, because the lie was flawless. The security office had been under renovation yesterday. There had been no cameras, no witnesses, only her accusation. I stepped toward the microphone. I wasn't anywhere near the records room. The vice principal frowned. Miss Hart has already submitted her written statement. Another teacher added quietly. And we have anonymous evidence. Anonymous, the favorite weapon of cowards. I turned toward Lena again. Our eyes met. For one brief second, her tears disappeared. The corner of her lips lifted. Barely. A smile no one else noticed. That tiny smile crushed 3 years of trust. 3 days earlier, I had refused a request. It was the first time I had ever said no to Lena. She had approached me outside the library after evening study. Ethan, I looked up from my notebook. She smiled the same gentle smile everyone adored. Can you tutor Daniel instead of me for a while? Daniel Cross, basketball captain, rich family, average grades. Her boyfriend, although she had never admitted it publicly. I have my own exam preparation, I answered. She blinked in surprise. You've never refused before. I need to focus on myself. Silence. A strange silence. Then she laughed softly. You're joking. I'm not. Her expression froze. I've spent years helping everyone else, I said calmly. This time I'm choosing my own future. She stared at me as if I had insulted her. You've changed. Maybe. She walked away without another word. I didn't chase after her. For the first time, I thought that was the end. I was wrong. The investigation lasted less than 24 hours. The school board announced its decision before anyone had a chance to question the evidence. Academic fraud, permanent expulsion, recommendation letters revoked, national scholarship canceled. The university admissions office would receive the disciplinary record. Everything I had worked toward vanished in a single afternoon. My homeroom teacher, Mr. Lawson, avoided looking at me while handing over the official documents. I'm sorry. His voice was barely audible. I argued against this. Then why did you sign it? He closed his eyes. I couldn't stop it. I nodded once. There was nothing else to say. Outside the administration building, rain poured across the campus. Students watched from covered walkways. Phones pointed toward me. Someone laughed. Someone else uploaded another video. I kept walking. Every step felt strangely light. When everything is taken away, there is nothing left to carry. That evening, my mother opened the front door before I reached for the bell. She smiled. How'd it? She saw the envelope in my hand. Her smile disappeared. Inside the living room, my father read every page in complete silence. Finally, he placed the documents on the table. I know you. Those 3 words almost broke me. You don't believe them? I believe my son. For the first time that day, someone chose me instead of the rumor. My mother reached across the table and squeezed my shaking hand. We'll appeal. I wanted to believe it. I really did. But deep inside, I had already seen Lena smile. People who smiled like that never acted without preparing every outcome. The appeal hearing lasted 12 minutes. 12. I counted everyone. The committee never asked me how the papers entered my locker. They never questioned why none of my fingerprints appeared on the photocopies. They never investigated the anonymous messages. Their decision had been made long before I entered the room. Appeal denied. The chairman slid the documents toward me. We wish you the best in your future. Future, an amusing word. Outside the school gates, Reporters had already gathered. Someone shouted, "Do you regret cheating?" Another voice followed. "Were you selling exam papers?" Microphones surrounded me. Cameras flashed. I said nothing. Silence was the only thing they couldn't twist. The following week, every university offer disappeared. One by one, each email carried different wording. The meaning remained the same. Application rejected. Application withdrawn. Application terminated. The national university that had once invited me to an academic interview erased my name from its records. Years of sacrifice ended without a single conversation. Friends stopped replying. Study groups removed me. Teachers who once praised my discipline now crossed the hallway to avoid me. Only one person visited, Mr. Lawson. He arrived carrying a cardboard box. "My classroom cleaned out your desk." Inside were notebooks, pens, and a framed certificate from a mathematics competition. He hesitated before speaking. "I shouldn't tell you this." My heartbeat quickened. "What is it?" I requested access to the evidence room. And I was denied. Why? They claimed the files had already been archived. So quickly. He nodded. Too quickly. A cold sensation crawled up my spine. Someone wasn't merely framing me. Someone was erasing every path toward the truth. Before leaving, Mr. Lawson stopped at the doorway. "Ethan." "Yes." "If you truly didn't do this." "I didn't." "Then don't waste your life proving yourself to people who already decided you're guilty." He left. His words lingered long after the door closed. That night, I opened every notebook I'd ever kept. Mathematics, physics, chemistry, schedules, goals. Every page revolved around one dream. The nation's top university. Not because of prestige, because it represented freedom. A place where effort mattered more than background. Where ability spoke louder than reputation. Now that dream seemed impossibly distant. I stared at the acceptance brochure pinned above my desk. Slowly, I removed it. Not because I had given up, because chasing the same path while carrying someone else's lies would destroy me. If the front door had been sealed, I would find another entrance, no matter how long it took. The next morning, my phone vibrated. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered, "Ethan Brooks." "Who's speaking?" A brief pause. "I'm calling from the Regional Academic Integrity Office." Every muscle in my body tensed. "We have received information regarding irregularities in your disciplinary case." My breathing stopped. "What kind of irregularities?" "We cannot discuss details over the phone." "Then why call me?" "Because someone submitted evidence anonymously." Anonymous again. But this time, the words sounded different. The voice continued, "We'd like to meet tomorrow." Before I could ask another question, the line disconnected. I lowered the phone slowly. Across the room, rain tapped against the window exactly as it had on the day everything collapsed. Only this time, it no longer sounded like morning. It sounded like something approaching, something that had waited until I stopped begging to be believed, something that might finally force the truth into the light. The Regional Academic Integrity Office occupied the 5th floor of a gray government building that looked forgotten by time. There were no banners, no students, no reporters, only silence. A receptionist led me into a conference room where a woman in her early 40s sat with a thin folder resting on the table. She wore no expression that hinted at sympathy. "I'm Claire Donovan." She offered a handshake. "Senior investigator." I shook her hand carefully. "Thank you for coming." I almost didn't. I expected that. She opened the folder. Inside was a copy of my disciplinary record. Every page was familiar. Every accusation. Every signature. And she placed another document beside it. I had never seen this one. "What is it?" "The school's internal evidence log." I frowned. The committee never showed me that. They weren't required to. Her calm tone somehow made the answer colder. She slid the page toward me. "Look at the timestamps." My eyes scanned the records. Evidence collected. 9:16 a.m. Locker sealed. 9:28 a.m. Anonymous email received. 10:41 a.m. I looked up. "Something's wrong." Claire nodded. "The anonymous email contained photographs of your locker after it had already been sealed." I blinked. "That's impossible." "Exactly." A heavy silence settled between us. If these timestamps are accurate, she continued, someone already had access to evidence that officially shouldn't have existed. My fingers tightened around the paper. So, someone inside the school. We're investigating possibilities. She deliberately avoided finishing the sentence. Government investigators never guessed. They waited for proof. I need one thing from you. What? Stop trying to clear your name publicly. I stared at her. You want me to stay quiet? I want whoever fabricated this case to believe you gave up. I leaned back. And if I don't, they'll become cautious. She closed the folder. I'd rather they become careless. As I walked out of the building, I finally understood. The investigation wasn't over. It had never truly begun. News spread quickly that I had withdrawn every public appeal. Online comments exploded. So he admitted it. I knew it. He couldn't fight the evidence. For the first time, I didn't respond. No explanations. No emotional posts. No interviews. Nothing. The silence irritated people far more than my arguments ever had. 3 days later, I returned to the public library. Not because anyone expected me, because I still intended to study. The entrance guard hesitated, then nodded. No questions. Inside, the familiar smell of books settled my heartbeat. I found an empty desk near the mathematics shelves. Opened my notebook. Picked up my pencil. For 2 uninterrupted hours, I became a student again instead of a suspect. Still pretending? The voice shattered the quiet. Daniel Cross stood beside my desk, hands in his pockets, smirking. Several students immediately looked over. I heard no university wants you. I kept writing. He laughed. I asked you something. You made a statement. His smile thinned. So this is the new you? I finished solving the equation before looking up. What do you want? I wanted to see what someone looks like after ruining his own life. I wouldn't know. His eyes narrowed. What does that mean? I didn't ruin mine. His jaw tightened. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he leaned closer. You should have stayed useful. The sentence was soft, almost impossible to hear. But I heard every word. Useful. Not friend. Not classmate. Useful. He straightened and walked away. I watched him leave without calling after him. That single sentence answered a question I hadn't realized I was asking. Lena wasn't the only one benefiting from my sacrifices. That evening, I opened old messages on my phone. Group projects, tutoring requests, competition preparations. Almost every conversation followed the same pattern. Ethan, can you help? Ethan, can you stay late? Ethan, could you explain this? Very few asked, how are you? I smiled bitterly. Maybe losing everything had stripped away more than my future. Maybe it had stripped away illusions. The following Monday, the school announced preparations for the National Academic Championship. The competition determined direct admission opportunities for the country's top university. Exactly the opportunity one had once expected to earn. Now my name wasn't even eligible. Instead, Daniel represented the school. The announcement appeared across every social media page. Photographs. Congratulations. Interviews. At the center of every picture stood Lena, smiling proudly beside him. Comments flooded beneath the post. The perfect couple. Beauty and genius. I almost laughed. Daniel had failed calculus twice before I began tutoring him. Genius. Interesting choice of word. That afternoon, Claire called again. We found something. Her voice remained measured. What? The anonymous account that reported you. You traced it. Not completely. So, it was created inside the school's network. A pulse pounded inside my temple. So it was an insider. We already suspected that. What changed? The account logged in again. My breath caught. Yesterday, I sat upright. Why would they risk that? They downloaded archived disciplinary records. For what? Claire hesitated. We're not sure. Then she asked a question that surprised me. Did anyone besides you suddenly stop helping Miss Hart recently? I frowned. No. Think carefully. I closed my eyes. Faces drifted through my memory. Study groups. Volunteers. Student council members. Then, one face emerged. Maya Chun. Quiet. Excellent programmer. Student council technology officer. She had abruptly resigned 2 weeks before my expulsion. I remember someone. Claire immediately noticed the change in my expression. Tell me, I explained everything I knew. It wasn't much, only that Maya had stopped attending meetings after a heated argument with Lena. Claire wrote every detail. That may be enough. 2 days later, I visited a small coffee shop near the subway station. Not intentionally. Rain had forced me inside. As I waited for my drink, someone quietly spoke behind me. Ethan. I turned. Maya. Chun stood there. She looked exhausted. Dark circles framed her eyes. She glanced toward the window before sitting across from me without asking permission. I don't have much time. You wanted to see me? No. Her answer surprised me. I wanted to avoid you. Silence stretched between us. Then she placed a flash drive on the table. I've carried this for weeks. I looked at it. What is it? I don't know everything. She swallowed. But I know enough. My heartbeat accelerated. She lowered her voice even further. Don't open it here. Why? Because if someone followed me. She didn't finish. Instead, she stood. I grabbed her wrist gently. Maya. She stopped. Why help me now? For several seconds, she couldn't meet my eyes. Finally, she whispered, because I stayed silent when they destroyed you. She pulled away. I won't make that mistake twice. She disappeared into the rain before I could ask another question. I stared at the tiny flash drive resting on the table. It weighed almost nothing, yet it suddenly felt heavier than every accusation I'd carried. Somewhere inside that piece of plastic, someone had hidden the truth, or the beginning of it. I didn't go home. The flash drive remained in my pocket while I walked aimlessly through the rain, replaying Maya's expression. She hadn't looked frightened. She had looked guilty. There was a difference. Fear wanted to survive. Guilt wanted to confess. By the time I reached my apartment, both of my parents were waiting in the living room. My mother stood the moment she saw my soaked clothes. You'll catch a cold. I'll change in a minute. She noticed the flash drive in my hand. What's that? I don't know yet. My father quietly placed his newspaper aside. You've been carrying that thing like it's made of glass. Maybe it is. I carried my laptop onto the dining table. For a few seconds, I simply stared at the empty USB port. If this contained nothing, I would lose another piece of hope. If it contained something, everything could change. I inserted it. There were only 3 folders. Meeting record, archive, backup. The first folder contained audio recordings. Dozens of them. Each file had a date. Most were from student council meetings. I clicked one at random. Static filled the speakers before familiar voices emerged. Daniel still hasn't submitted his report. We'll use Ethan's draft. Lena's voice. Calm. Matter of fact. Another student hesitated. But Ethan wrote that for the competition. He won't refuse. Soft laughter echoed around the room. Someone asked, shouldn't we at least tell him? Lena answered without hesitation. If we ask, he'll overthink it. Then, we'll tell him afterward. The recording ended. I sat motionless. It wasn't illegal. It wasn't proof of the framing, but it was proof of something else. For years, they had never treated me like an equal, only a resource. My father quietly closed the laptop. You don't need to hear the rest tonight. I do. No. His voice remained gentle. You need sleep before you hear more people disappoint you. The next morning, I opened the second folder. Archived emails, schedules, student council documents. Everything seemed ordinary until one spreadsheet caught my attention. Volunteer hours allocation. Every major event listed volunteer credits. My name appeared beside almost every project, yet under the final approved version. Those hours had been reassigned. Daniel Cross. Lena Hart. 3 other council members. Not me. Months of work. Officially credited to someone else. I laughed once. A tired, hollow laugh. So that's how they built their applications. My mother looked over my shoulder. They stole your achievements. No. I shook my head slowly. They raced me first. Claire arrived that afternoon. She listened without interrupting as I explained everything Maya had given me. When she reached the spreadsheet, her eyes narrowed. Interesting. You think this matters? It establishes a pattern. What pattern? Systematic misrepresentation. She carefully copied every file onto an encrypted drive. Then she paused at the final folder. Backup. There are password-protected files. I haven't opened them. She nodded. Our forensic team can. I hesitated. If this proves everything, She met my gaze. It may prove nothing. The answer surprised me. You don't sound optimistic. I'm realistic. She leaned back. Truth doesn't automatically defeat lies. It needs evidence. It needs admissible evidence. I silently absorbed her words. The difference mattered. A recording could expose someone's character. It might not expose a crime. We'll keep digging. As she reached the door, she suddenly turned back. Maya hasn't answered our calls. My stomach tightened. What? She disappeared last night. Maya's apartment was empty. The landlord claimed she had moved out before sunrise. No forwarding address. No relatives nearby. No explanation. Only an abandoned flower pot remained outside her door. Claire's investigators searched legally. I searched emotionally. Every place I remembered seeing Maya. The campus cafe. The library. The old computer lab. Nothing. It was as if she had erased herself. Meanwhile, the National Academic Championship began. I watched the opening ceremony through an online live stream. Not because I wanted to, because I wanted to know what came next. Daniel walked confidently onto the stage wearing the school's official blazer. Lena stood in the audience leading applause. The host smiled brightly. Our representative has consistently demonstrated outstanding academic excellence and integrity. Integrity. The word almost made me close the stream. Instead, I forced myself to keep watching. The first round was mathematics. Daniel struggled. Even through the broadcast, it was obvious. His answers came slowly. His confidence faded. By the second round, whispers spread among the judges. The commentator tried to remain positive. Our contestant appears under unexpected pressure. Unexpected. I knew the truth. Daniel wasn't solving problems under pressure. He was solving them without me. That evening, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Again, I answered cautiously. Ethan. The voice was barely audible. Maya. Don't say my name. I stood immediately. Where are you? They're looking for me. Who? Silence. Then a shaky breath. I copied more than recordings. What do you mean? The password. Her voice cracked. The password isn't random. I grabbed a notebook. Tell me. It isn't numbers. What is it? It's... The line suddenly filled with static. Maya. A loud metallic sound echoed. Someone shouted in the distance. Then the call disconnected. I called back instantly. Phone switched off. My hands trembled. Not from fear. From helplessness. An hour later, Claire arrived with 2 investigators. She had already traced the call. It lasted 43 seconds. Can you find her? We're trying. What about the password? What did she say exactly? I repeated every word. Claire remained silent for nearly a minute. Then she looked at the spreadsheet Maya had provided. The password isn't numbers. She whispered the sentence to herself. Suddenly, she reached for another document. The volunteer records. I frowned. What about them? Look carefully. Every student had an identification number, except one entry. Mine. Instead of a number, there was a word. Foundation. Claire's eyes widened. The backup password. I quickly typed the word. The encrypted folder opened. Dozens of hidden files appeared. Emails. Financial transfers. Security access logs. And one video, recorded inside the school's archive room. Date stamped. The day before my expulsion. The footage showed Lena unlocking the evidence cabinet. Daniel entered seconds later, carrying a sealed envelope. Neither of them noticed the security camera mounted above the door. The camera had no audio. It didn't need any. Daniel removed examination papers from the envelope. Lena pointed toward another locker tag. Mine. Together. They walked out carrying everything needed to destroy my future. No explanation. No ambiguity. Only actions. Claire slowly exhaled. We finally have something they can't explain. Before anyone could speak again, her phone rang. She answered immediately. Her expression changed. What happened? The investigator on the other end spoke rapidly. Claire's face hardened. She ended the call and looked directly at me. We found Maya. My heart leaped. Is she okay? Claire didn't answer immediately. Instead, she folded the laptop shut. They found her unconscious. The room fell into complete silence. Then Claire quietly added, and someone tried very hard to make it look like an accident. The hospital corridor smelled of disinfectant and stale coffee. Claire walked beside me without saying a word. Neither of us needed small talk. Every answer I wanted waited behind a white door guarded by a police officer. When we reached the intensive care unit, the officer stepped aside after recognizing Claire. "She's stable," he said quietly, "but unconscious." My chest tightened. The guilt in Maya's eyes at the coffee shop replayed in my mind. She had chosen to speak. Someone had chosen to silence her. Claire stopped before entering. "One thing first." She handed me a thin folder. The forensic team finished authenticating the files. I opened it. Every page carried official seals. Video verified. Metadata intact. No evidence of manipulation. The words blurred for a moment. For weeks, I had been called a liar. Now the truth existed in black ink. Legally, undeniably. I closed the folder. "When do we release it?" "We don't." I looked at her in disbelief. "What?" "Not yet. They framed me." "I know. They tried to kill Maya." "I know." "Then why wait?" Claire's expression remained calm. "Because exposing one crime before proving the others lets the guilty prepare their defense." She wasn't protecting them. She was trapping them. I slowly nodded. "What do you need from me?" "Nothing." That answer surprised me. For the first time since this began. She looked directly into my eyes. "I need you to do absolutely nothing." Doing nothing turned out to be the hardest thing I'd ever done. The championship continued. Daniel somehow reached the final round despite several mediocre performances. The media praised his perseverance. Lena became even more popular. She gave interviews about overcoming school scandals together. One reporter asked her whether my case had affected the school. She lowered her head. "It breaks my heart." Her voice trembled. "I always believed everyone deserves a second chance." The comments beneath the interview flooded with sympathy. "She's so kind. What a strong woman." I closed the video before reading another sentence. Weeks ago, I would have felt anger. Now, I only felt distance. She no longer occupied my thoughts. She occupied an investigation. 3 days later, my phone rang. It was Mr. Lawson. "Ethan." His voice sounded unusually cheerful. "I've been suspended." I blinked. "Congratulations?" He laughed. I've never heard anyone congratulate someone for suspension. "What happened?" I refused to alter attendance records. The smile faded from my face. "They asked you to?" "Yesterday." "For whom?" A long silence answered before he finally spoke. "Daniel." I gripped the phone tighter. "They're still covering for him. They're panicking." Mr. Lawson's tone became serious. "Ethan, honest people don't rewrite records unless they believe something much worse is about to be exposed." After hanging up, I called Claire immediately. She answered on the first ring. "I know. You already heard? We've obtained the altered records. So they're destroying evidence. They're trying." She paused. "They're too late." The Board of Education scheduled an emergency press conference for Friday morning. Officially, the topic was administrative transparency. Unofficially, it was the beginning of the end. Claire called the night before. "You should attend." "As what?" "As yourself." "No speech." "No." "No statement." "No." "No confrontation." "No." She paused. The truth speaks better without interruption. The conference hall filled quickly. Journalists, teachers, parents, students. Television cameras lined the walls. For the first time since my expulsion, I walked into a public room without lowering my head. Whispers followed me, but they sounded different. Not judgment, curiosity. Lena entered several minutes later. She froze when she saw me. Our eyes met. She recovered almost instantly and forced a polite smile. "I didn't expect you here." "I know." She hesitated. "Whatever happens today," I calmly interrupted, "you don't need to explain anything to me." For the first time since we met years ago, she looked uncertain, not guilty, afraid. Daniel arrived moments later. He barely glanced at me. Instead, he whispered something to Lena. She nodded nervously. Both of them kept looking toward the entrance, as if waiting for someone to save them. No one came. At exactly 10 o'clock, the chairman of the board stepped to the podium. "We have concluded an independent investigation into disciplinary procedures at Westbridge Academy." The room became silent. Claire walked onto the stage, carrying several sealed evidence boxes. Gasps spread through the audience. Journalists immediately raised their cameras. The chairman continued. Our findings reveal serious misconduct involving fabricated evidence, falsified records, and abuse of administrative authority. Every word struck like a hammer. He nodded toward Claire. She connected a laptop to the projector. The security footage appeared on the giant screen. No narration, no dramatic music, only the timestamp. Then, Lena unlocking the evidence cabinet. Daniel carrying the envelope. The entire room watched in complete silence. When the video ended, nobody applauded. Nobody spoke. Some truths demanded silence. A reporter stood abruptly. Is the footage authentic? Claire held up the forensic report, verified by independent digital forensic specialists. Another reporter shouted, was Mr. Ethan Brooks falsely expelled? Yes. The single word echoed across the hall. Another question followed immediately. Who authorized the disciplinary decision? The chairman slowly removed his glasses. The former vice principal. Former. Journalists immediately understood. The room erupted into shouting. Questions flew from every direction. Lena suddenly stood. This isn't. Claire interrupted. Miss Hart. The entire hall turned toward her. We also recovered deleted emails. Claire projected another document. An email from Lena to Daniel. He finally refused. We have to remove him before applications are finalized. Another. After this, nobody will question your scholarship. Another. Leave the locker key with me. Lena's face turned completely white. Daniel took one step backward, then another. The cameras followed every movement. A police officer approached them calmly. Lena Hart. Daniel Cross. You are both under investigation for evidence fabrication, fraud, and obstruction. Handcuffs clicked. The sound was almost quiet. It carried farther than every accusation they had ever made against me. Neither of them looked at me as they were escorted from the hall. They looked only at the floor, because there was nowhere else left to hide. At the back of the room, Mr. Lawson smiled faintly. My parents stood together, tears in their eyes. I didn't feel victorious. I felt light, not because my enemies had fallen, because the weight I had carried no longer belonged to me. Their choices had finally become their own burden. The reinstatement letter arrived on a quiet Monday morning. There were no reporters outside my apartment, no flashing cameras, just a plain white envelope resting in a mailbox. I carried it upstairs without opening it. My mother watched me from the kitchen. Aren't you going to read it? I placed the envelope on the dining table. I already know what it says. My father folded his newspaper. Then why wait? I looked at the envelope for several seconds. Because this piece of paper isn't what I've been waiting for. My mother smiled softly. What were you waiting for? I answered honestly. To stop needing it. Only then did I break the seal. The letter was formal. My expulsion had been rescinded. My academic record restored. The disciplinary decision declared invalid. The school offered a public apology and immediate reinstatement. There was even a paragraph expressing deep regret. I finished reading and quietly folded the pages. My father raised an eyebrow. Well, I'm not going back. Silence settled over the room. Not shocked silence. Thoughtful silence. Finally, my father nodded. I hoped you'd say that. 3 days later, Westbridge Academy held a special assembly. Every student was required to attend. The principal, newly appointed after the investigation, stood on the stage. Our institution failed one of its own students. No excuses, no vague wording, only responsibility. Then he invited me onto the stage. The same stage where my locker had been emptied weeks earlier. The same place where hundreds of people had watched my future collapse. This time, the auditorium was even quieter. The principal handed me a microphone. If you'd like to say something. Hundreds of eyes waited. Months ago, I would have begged them to believe me. Now, I no longer needed their belief. I looked across the audience. Some students avoided my gaze. Others looked ashamed. A few teachers wiped their eyes. I spoke calmly. I don't want revenge. The room remained silent. I don't want apologies from people who only apologize after the truth becomes convenient. A few students lowered their heads. I only hope that the next student standing where I once stood is given something I never received. I paused. The chance to be heard. I returned the microphone. No dramatic speech. No accusations. Nothing more needed to be said. As I stepped off the stage, applause slowly began. It spread through the auditorium until everyone was standing. I didn't bow. I simply walked toward the exit. This time, no one stopped me. Outside, Mr. Lawson caught up with me. "You know," he said with a grin, "you've become rather difficult to impress." "I've had practice." He laughed. Then his expression softened. "The National University contacted me." I stopped walking. "They did. They're requesting a meeting." I thought my application cycle was over. It was. He smiled. They've decided to make an exception. My heartbeat quickened, not because of excitement, because for the first time, the opportunity wasn't built on sacrifice. It was built on truth. The admissions office overlooked a quiet campus filled with old trees and stone buildings. I had imagined visiting this university for years. Back then, I imagined arriving as the student with perfect scores. Instead, I arrived as the student whose life had nearly been destroyed. Professor Amelia Grant, Dean of Admissions, greeted me personally. She offered tea before asking a single question. "I've already read your academic record." I nodded. "I've also read the investigation." Another nod. Then she surprised me. "So I'd rather talk about something else." "What?" She smiled. "What have you learned?" No questions about grades. No questions about rankings. Just one simple question. I thought carefully. I learned that achievement without boundaries becomes exploitation. She listened quietly. I learned that helping people isn't wrong. I paused. But helping people who believe they're entitled to your sacrifice eventually teaches them to stop seeing you as a person. Professor Grant nodded slowly. "And now, I still want to help people." I smiled faintly. "I just won't disappear while doing it." She closed her notebook. "I think you'll fit in very well here." A week later, the acceptance email arrived. "Congratulations." One word. The same dream. A completely different meaning. When I showed my parents, my mother cried before finishing the first sentence. My father cleared his throat several times before speaking. "I suppose." He smiled awkwardly. "We should celebrate." We ordered takeout from my favorite restaurant. Nothing expensive. Nothing extravagant. Just the three of us eating together while laughing about things completely unrelated to scandals or investigations. For the first time in months, our home sounded normal again. Before leaving for university, I visited the rehabilitation center where Maya was recovering. She was sitting beside the window, reading a programming magazine. The bruises had mostly faded. When she saw me, she smiled sheepishly. "I owe you an apology. You already gave me the truth. I waited too long. You came before it was impossible." She looked down. "I was scared." "I know." She laughed quietly. "You aren't angry?" "I was." I pulled a chair beside her. But carrying anger for someone who already regrets their choices only creates another prison. Tears filled her eyes. "I'm glad you got your future back." I shook my head gently. "I didn't get it back." She looked confused. "I built a new one. For the first time since we'd met." Her smile reached her eyes. Outside the window, autumn sunlight spread across the garden. The season had changed. So had we. Neither of us could return to the people we had once been. And neither of us wanted to. The first snowfall arrived during my second month at the National University. Students hurried between lectures with steaming cups of coffee and heavy backpacks. For the first time in years, no one looked at me because of rumors. They looked at me because I belonged there. It was an unfamiliar kind of peace. Not excitement, not triumph, simply peace. My days settled into a rhythm. Morning lectures, research meetings, late evenings in a mathematics laboratory. Unlike my old school, nobody expected me to carry their work. Study groups divided assignments fairly. Questions were followed by gratitude. Ideas were challenged without becoming personal. It took me weeks to stop waiting for someone to exploit my willingness to help. One afternoon, Professor Grant found me alone in the library. "You've been declining leadership positions." I closed my notebook. "I've had enough of leadership." She smiled knowingly. "No." She pulled out a chair and sat across from me. "You've had enough of being used." The distinction caught me off guard. You've confused responsibility with self-sacrifice. I remained silent. She continued, a good leader doesn't solve everyone's problems. They teach people to solve their own. Her words lingered long after she left. Perhaps walking away had protected me. But maybe learning how to stay without disappearing was the next lesson. Near the end of the semester, the university hosted an academic ethics forum. Students from schools across the country attended. To my surprise, Professor Grant submitted my name as one of the speakers. I don't think I'm the right person. I disagree. I don't want to become famous because of what happened. You won't. She handed me the invitation. You'll be remembered because of what you learned. The auditorium was filled with students, educators, and journalists. As I waited backstage, the event coordinator approached me. There's someone asking to see you. I frowned. Who? They refused to give a name. Curiosity overcame hesitation. I stepped into a quiet hallway. A woman in a gray suit stood near the window. It took me several seconds to recognize her. Former Vice Principal Margaret Ellis, the woman who had signed my expulsion. She looked older, not because of time, because of consequences. She bowed her head. I wanted to apologize. I didn't answer. I failed my duty. You did. I convinced myself I was protecting the school's reputation. She laughed bitterly. I destroyed it instead. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable. It was honest. She reached in her bag and handed me a sealed envelope. My resignation became effective last month. I accepted the envelope without opening it. I don't expect forgiveness. You shouldn't. She nodded slowly. I only wanted you to hear the apology from me instead of reading it in a newspaper. For the first time since my expulsion, I looked at her without anger. Not because she deserved mercy, because I no longer needed resentment to remember what she'd done. I accept that you're sorry. She looked up hopefully. I continued calmly. But acceptance isn't the same as forgiveness. A tear rolled down her cheek. I understand. She turned and quietly walked away. I never opened the envelope. Some chapters didn't need to be reread. When my turn came to speak, the auditorium fell silent. I stood behind the podium and looked across hundreds of unfamiliar faces. Years ago, that would have terrified me. Now, it simply reminded me how many people deserved honesty. I was once told, I began, that success belongs to those willing to sacrifice everything. The audience listened carefully. I believed that. I smiled faintly. I was wrong. A few students exchanged curious glances. I thought kindness meant saying yes. I thought loyalty meant carrying other people's burdens. I thought protecting others would eventually make them protect me. I paused. It doesn't. The room remained completely still. Kindness without boundaries becomes permission. Loyalty without honesty becomes control. And silence in the face of injustice helps the wrong person. I wasn't speaking only about myself anymore. I was speaking to everyone who had ever mistaken self-erasure for virtue. I didn't rebuild my life by defeating the people who harmed me. I rebuilt it by refusing to let their choices define mine. When I finished, there was no immediate applause. Only thoughtful silence. Then one student stood. Another followed. Soon the entire auditorium rose to its feet. Not for my suffering, for the lesson it had become. Months later, spring returned. Cherry blossoms lined the university pathways. After my final examination, I wandered through campus without any destination. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Maya. Started my internship today. Thank you for not giving up. I smiled and replied. You didn't either. That's why we're both here. A second message arrived from Mr. Lawson. My new school has a mathematics club. They're exhausting me already. I laughed aloud. Then another notification appeared. A news headline. Former students convicted in academic fraud case. I read only the headline before locking my phone. I didn't need the details. Their story had already reached its ending. Mine hadn't. Ahead of me, students crossed the courtyard carrying books, arguing about assignments, planning research projects, and laughing about ordinary things. Once, I believed the nation's top university was the destination. Standing there beneath the flowering trees, I finally understood. It had never been the destination. It had been the place where I learned that success earned at the cost of yourself was never success at all. I looked toward the library, adjusted the strap of my backpack, and kept walking. Not toward revenge, not toward the past, but toward a future built by my own choices. One step at a time. The end.